Birds are very, very sensitive to climate and winds and the sun. And if they can't see where the sun is, and if they can't fly with the wind, they stay put. And that's exactly what happened. Turns out these birds, I know it's a long cycle, but we live in a complex world. These birds are reaching 60% infected.
This is Life's Tough. Explorers are tougher. And I'm your host, Richard Wiese. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. Greetings to you wherever you are in the world, and I hope you're well. Our guest today, Dr. Alex Moore, is a Harvard climatologist. He grew up in Italy and Greece, finished his education in America. And when it comes to climate, he's a bit of a Sherlock Holmes, as he uses ice core samples from glaciers, historical records, nautical archaeology, volcanology, and the list goes on and on. At Harvard, he taught 10 different courses. And if you look at his CV, and I do encourage people to look Alex Moore up, he has probably more titles than anyone I know. Welcome to Life's Tough, Alex Moore.
Hi, Richard. If only the paycheck was as big as numerous as the title. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
Well, let's go down the university list because it's like you must have T-shirts that say Harvard, University of Maine. You have Long Island University. What else do you have? What are your titles, Alex?
First of all, the easiest way to know that somebody didn't go to Harvard is if they actually wear a Harvard T-shirt. We don't wear the T-shirts. No bling for us. It's all about the research. It's all about the work. I came to this country as an immigrant at 17, and I actually tried to finish high school, and that didn't work out in New York City because I ran out of money. So I moved to Chicago, small university in San Francisco took me in for a semester. And then I moved to Washington University in St. Louis, where I got a job and a scholarship. There I got my BA. And then I wrote a thesis that got me into Harvard right away for a PhD, fully funded at 22, I think.
Wow.
As soon as I got to Harvard, figured out that the program I was in was not really the right one. So I created my own interdisciplinary program to figure out why somebody would come up with this idea of public health and universal healthcare. And I found the first instance of it. And it happened during a climate crisis. It happens, and then a pandemic. So that's where I started. After the PhD, I started a postdoc with the Climate Change Institute at the University of Maine, which in my opinion is the best place in the world to study climate change, directed by Paul Majewski, a Paul Lowell Thomas Fellow at the club, the Explorers Club. Really a fantastic group of scientists from all over the world that are affiliated with it. And then most recently, 2 years ago, I teach at Long Island University in New York City as Associate Professor of Environmental Health, as well as the Director of the Honors College there.
You mentioned in the beginning, if only titles or institutes were dollars. And so in sports, athletes are sort of measured by statistics. And if you're a finance business guy, you're measured in dollars and cents. So how are researchers and academics sort of measured on that level? How do you measure effectiveness?
In several ways. It used to be a number of publications, and then became quality of publications, and then it became impact of publications. And now it's not only impact, but also as in how many people cite you, but also how many people see your work. For that, I think I've been trying to adapt as the standard changes. The last standard is actually the one where my work and my team, we've succeeded the most. Our latest article from September, for example, on the impact of climate on the last great pandemic, the Spanish flu, is in the top 5% of all articles that have ever been tracked. It's been seen by millions of people in multiple formats on CNN, Washington Post. There's a huge list. They actually track these things now. But there are other ways to track impact. How many people cite you? That's an H index, and the sheer number of publications. I don't have that many because, as you mentioned, the work is incredibly complex, and we work with the highest resolution climate record on the planet. We have one data point per year. That is, I can tell you what the climate was, the composition of the atmosphere was every day for the last 2,000 years. That was never possible before. Each article is groundbreaking. Each article has taken an enormous amount of time to put together, as opposed to, oh, look, I see a pattern in this, and here's an article. We don't do that.
At 17, how did you move to the United States, and where did you move, and to with who, and how did that decision come about?
So it's a silly story. It's like an unbelievable story. I was driving one night, my motorcycle, small scooter, nothing enormous, to my grandparents' house. And there are no traffic stops really in Italy because people just, as you know, you have your own Italian blood. People just go right through them. Oh, nobody's coming. And I was coming and they didn't notice me. And their drunk driver hit me fairly high speed. And I got a refund from that. What is it called? A settlement from that, which was about $1,400. The first thing I did was I bought a ticket to New York City. I never saw it.
But you do have parents and grandparents. Aren't they saying, Alex, I could not have done that. Let's put it this way. Not only I have not done that at 17, I would have gotten my parents' permission to do that. So
right. The parents weren't really the problem. The grandparents might have been. And the problem was, I don't know if you remember Y2K in 1999. And I just told my grandma, look, Y2K is going to come. We're all going to die. Can I please die in New York City? I haven't seen it once. I think she took the joke and she just said, okay, whatever, go do. I had traveled already a lot. I traveled all throughout Europe. And so, taking a leap across the Atlantic wasn't as crazy. I moved here and I started staying on 63rd Street and Broadway at the YMCA. I stayed there for quite a while, trying to make as much money as I could.
Doing what?
And working at Starbucks in Lincoln Center.
Do you have a high school equivalent of a diploma yet?
Nope.
And so what's the game plan? You're sort of, to some degree, and are you even a legal immigrant?
So I had a work study system that the International Baccalaureate program allowed. So I actually got into an International Baccalaureate program by just corresponding with somebody in New York City. But that didn't last very long. As I said, I ran out of money really fast. It's New York City. So a friend of mine told me in Chicago, why don't you come here instead of going back? And I went to Chicago and visited various colleges and realized I didn't have to finish high school. I could take a GED. So I took a GED with various colorful characters. I'm not going to say what they did. And passed that, TOEFL, SAT, ACT, all in about a couple of months. And I got into college.
What college did you get into?
It was called University of San Francisco in Joliet, Illinois.
Okay.
And it was really cool college that maybe had 3 or 4 halls, library. And they were very, very kind to take a chance on me. And I had to get up at 4 a.m. to get on a bus to get there at 6 in the freezing cold.
I'm exhausted hearing about you just getting from high school to college. Now, Alex, you had to innately be a smart person because most kids at 17 going into 18 would be so far adrift. The overcome economically, New York City, and then the emotional level of really not having any family around you. I mean, those had to be super challenging times.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd never expected, having missing people. But I'm very grateful to the friend who then became a partner in Chicago, who she was just wonderful. And we stayed together for 5 years, and then and we moved together to St. Louis to Washington University, where I got finally got my degree.
And how does that jump now? Harvard. You can sort of be cavalier about it now, but how does one then get into a PhD program at Harvard?
Right. So I wanted to be a doctor because my grandfather was a doctor, and I love helping people. I love just, I don't know, it's that giving thing. I guess I was raised that way. Very Catholic. Very, you got to do good works, help people. And when I got here, the other culture shock was there is no healthcare, and what are you going to do? I was one of the people that didn't have healthcare for a while. I just realized in college, I can't be a doctor. I can't work in the system. I have to figure out what's wrong with it. So I wrote a thesis trying to get at that. It was an interdisciplinary thesis in both public health, economics, law, and a bit of climate science, but not much. That thesis won me admission to Harvard. So most PhDs at that level are fully funded. So it's just a question of applying. And if they accept you, then you've got a full ride for 6 years to go to Harvard, and you get paid a stipend and you teach after your second year. So that's what happened. I actually applied. I was very arrogant. I applied only to 3 programs. Harvard was one of them. And I got only into Harvard. So that was, I remember it was the second happiest day of my life. I think the first really happy day was when I got my green card. And then I got the purple or crimson package in the mail. It used to come in the mail, big package. I think I jumped.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition.
This is like the American success story. This is, when I think about, as we've discussed before, my mother's family is from Corleone, Sicily.
Yes.
Which means you should be respecting me a little more, Alex.
Yes, of course.
But
I haven't received an offer I can't refuse yet.
Yeah. When people think of especially Ivy League institutes, they always talk about the ivory towers, right? And so there's kind of 2 ways it can go for you. And I think the way it has gone from you, just knowing what I know, is because your journey, nothing was certain. You have to have a tremendous amount of empathy for other people, because you've lived that life of loneliness, of uncertainty, of the existential question is, where is my life going? You've gone through things by the time you were 21 that I think people my age go through now. So it has to have formed you in a way that's different, but maybe wonderfully different.
Yeah, definitely. Empathy is probably one of the emotions or character traits that define me the most. Not to brag. I try to feel what other people are feeling at the same time, and that comes naturally. I'm uncomfortable when someone else is uncomfortable in the same room, and that comes from the fact that it's been a tough 21 years getting here. So,
Alex, one of the things I've enjoyed most about you is that you, when you come to on a social level, sort of academic discussions, and I'm not talking about numbers and stuff, just any subject, that it's really fun to talk to someone who has an interesting, educated point of view that lays out an argument so well. Recently, it might have been pretty close to when the pandemic just started. I was taking a train back from New York City to Connecticut, and I happened to see something pop up on a academic discussion on the worst year to be a human. And I think you were assigned, let's see, what year were you assigned?
Oh, 1348, I think.
Yeah, so 1348. So we had other people talking about different eras. And so when people think of 2020 and 21, pretty bad years. I know that my own great-grandmother died in New York City of Spanish flu. And my grandmother was 12 and she had to take care of 4 younger brothers and sisters. I could never really understand what she was talking about at the time because I had nothing to really compare it to. So take us back on some of those even worse years. Go back to the plague.
So the plague, 1348, was what we call the second pandemic. And the first pandemic was 542 until 700. So that was 1400 years ago. The second pandemic was 1346, if you start in the Black Sea, all the way to really 1700. It continued coming back. It started in Italy because all the ports were in Italy. So Sicily was the first one to hit it, to get it in Europe, and then continued to Genoa and Venice, and then throughout Europe. And oddly, the same. You're going to be the first ones to know the same spots that had the concentration of COVID victims during COVID were the same spots that we had during the Black Death. The major difference is that the Black Deaths, which was plague, as in a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, had a death rate of 40 to 60%. So today you might know somebody who got COVID. You might know a friend of a friend who died. When you have 40 to 60% of the population die, you see that you think New York City's empty now. It's a flattening. It's an emptying of everything. Your neighbors aren't there anymore. You're the 40%. You're the remaining person. The economy absolutely flattened. It plummeted. In fact, it's the only 5 years, 48 to 52, 53. It's the only 5 years in human history where we can actually measure the air being completely clean. There was no mining, no commercial, no nothing. That's how we know that it was really terrible. And we actually discovered this. I published in 2017, and people said, "Can't be possible. They must have continued doing something. It can't be possible that pollution stops when pandemics are around," and that's exactly what happened during COVID as well, although to a lesser extent. So the Black Death collapsed civilization in many ways, collapsed the economy, collapsed the healthcare system, such as it was, and it actually helped strengthen what was there in certain countries. That's why public health was really born. Just before and then after.
I know that we talked a little about butterfly effect, that things aren't singular events to themselves. And so you've been really kind of groundbreaking, or at least you and your colleagues, on pinning pandemics like COVID-19 to climate. How does that work?
We know that climate can affect it, but nobody's figured out that it's connected to climate in a sense as its emergence is not connected to climate. It's connected to wildlife trade. That's most likely where it emerged, right, out of a wildlife trade market. But in other pandemics, including this one, climate certainly has an effect. For example, the Spanish flu 100 years ago, which came right at the tail end of World War I. When the war was still going, it started with, it's strange. It's like an eerie parallel in February of 1918, just about a century and a year before ours. In February, it started happening. And the first wave was called benign because didn't kill as many people. And then it really popped up in the fall, second wave, September, October, just like the second wave we had last fall. I discovered with my colleagues a climate anomaly right over Britain and northern France and Belgium and Germany, and you can see this blob on the articles and in the media, this blob of low pressure, which basically means a lot of rain and cold. And that continued just lingering there. It's not like weather that stays, it stays there for a couple of days and goes away. No, it stayed there for 6 years. It stayed there during the war. And I'll explain to you why it stayed there. But the effect of it was, first of all, to flood the trenches, flood the battlefields, flood the cities. When you have floods, water gets contaminated. That's why you get cholera epidemics every time you have a hurricane. Well, in this case, it affected also the migration of the main vector and the main carrier of this disease, which is birds. Birds are very, very sensitive to climate and winds and the sun. And if they can't see where the sun is, and if they can't fly with the wind, they stay put. And that's exactly what happened. Turns out these birds, I know it's a long cycle, but we live in a complex world. These birds are reaching 60% infection rates in the fall. And they stayed put in the lakes that were giving water to the trenches, giving water to people, and they contaminated them with their waste. It's virally infected for 2 weeks once it's in the water. We know that this is an effect. It's a pattern that we recognize in the modern world, but we don't understand why. I never understood why nobody had looked at this in the past. The reason why we had the climate anomaly, Paul Majewski and I believe that it was due to the fact that we were bombing Europe more than ever before with both planes and cannons. And this constant bombing was causing dust to go up in the air. And as dust goes up in the air, water molecules find the dust particles and they like them and they kind of hug and they create droplets, and that's rain. And so we kept it there with our fighting. In fact, the climate anomaly disappeared after the end of the war on the 11th of November, 1918. It actually disappeared shortly thereafter. So we live in a complex world, and preventing new pandemics and preventing the degradation of our world that we love so much. You and I, are nature lovers, and it really requires that complexity, understanding that complexity, and understanding that we live in an interdisciplinary world. We have to learn all of these disciplines to understand it.
Alex, I started this conversation in your introduction saying that you were like a Sherlock Holmes putting bits of information, but I'd like to thank you for taking that plane ride from that fishing village to do what you do. I think that that the world can only prosper through enlightened thought, and there is a historical precedent for enlightenment coming from Italy. And so I'd like to thank you for being on Life's Tough, but Explorers Are Tougher.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support, so make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.